Welcome to the Vulnerable Scientist Podcast, a space for scientists to be honest and authentic on their stories. This is your host, Sarah Nyakeri. You're listening to the third episode of our new series where we are letting Kenyans give their views on the recent GMO ban being lifted after a cabinet meeting on October 3rd, which was chaired by the sitting Kenyan President, Dr. William Ruto, who happens to be a scientist with a PhD in ecology. This comes after a 10-year ban by a previous public health minister. If you want to find out how and why, listen to our previous episodes. After our previous episodes, where we had a cancer researcher, Dr. Victor Oria, and a plant biotechnologist who has made a GMO before, Dr. Susan Mwenga, of which all of them are Kenyans, I'm quite surprised with the interest when it comes to the spike of downloads I got from these two episodes. When I'm still doing the interviews, I found a lot of questions and worries around the regulation of the GMO. So this made me send some more questions to a previous Kenyan regulator for her comments, working at the NBA, National Biosafety Authority. I also reached out to a biosafety officer from National Biosafety Authority, but before we get to that, let's have some comments from Typical Kenyans. On this episode, I am bringing one of those typical Kenyans that read widely on topics not related to their daily work. When I asked her why she accepted to comment on the issue, here is what she had to say.
The thing is, in my house, I have 9 children.
Wow. Why?
Yes.
Why am I asking why?
So anything that will feed them.
You need the food.
And I'll need the food.
Yeah.
I don't need to worry that we don't have enough rain. Because when we don't have enough rain, then there's no food, then it becomes expensive and so forth. So as a parent, I'm not only looking out for me, I'm actually also looking out for my children, hoping that one day they'll perpetuate my gene. Yeah, survival.
Wondering why she said that? Let's dive into the episode, and by the end of the episode, I hope to get questions and comments on what she will have to say by tagging this podcast on all social media platforms at TV Scientist Board.
My name is Dr. Muthoni. I'm from Strathmore University. I'm a senior lecturer in mathematics and actuarial science. And I'm also the head of mathematical finance, which is a section under the School of Mathematics or the Institute of Mathematical Sciences in Strathmore. What is GMO? First, GMO stands for Genetically Modified Organisms. And these particular organisms are those ones that we have their genes altered using genetic engineering methods. Yeah? So what happens, like now, for instance, if you're looking at it from a research perspective or from a lab perspective, is that we have different key steps. Yeah? So the steps in genetic engineering is that first we look at a particular, it could be an animal, it could be a plant, it could be a living thing. Yeah. So what we do is that we first identify a trait of interest. And then once you get that particular trait, you isolate it now from the DNA, and then you isolate the trait, and then you insert that trait into a desired organism. So first you've identified a trait. Like now, let me give an example. Let's say it was possible to do this. Let's say I look at you and I think, she has very, very, very beautiful teeth. And we'd like the rest of the humanity to have teeth like hers. So the trait that we would have identified in you, the desirable trait, is your teeth. And then now we decide, we extract those teeth, like we look at it, we study it, we create the same dentures, and we take them and then replicate them and put them in another human being. And after we've put them in another human being, this is from a very simplistic position, yeah? When we put it in another human being, then we propagate or breed that other human being to ensure that every other child they ever give birth to or they ever produce will have your teeth. Now, when it comes to plants, like now let me look at something like when we want to look at insect trying to create resistance in resistance, or what we call insect resistance in crops. I will actually start with I believe you've heard on the streets, you've heard of what we call BT maize. That's what many people, even in the forum, in the TV, everyone is talking about BC maize. But so what happens is that now the background is that we have when it comes to crop production, farmers, one of the biggest challenges they face is pests. And these pests would be caterpillars. And so what they will do, they'll stalk the borers, like they would eat the stalks, they eat the leaves, they do all these things. And like when you look at the beetle, the beetle grabs that eat the roots. So we have different kinds of pests or different kind of animals that target different parts of a plant. So now when we look at now what happens now in 1996, there was what happens is that some scientists realized that there was some caterpillars or some animals. Let me call them actually some caterpillars. So what they realized is that some caterpillars would die after consuming a particular product, a particular crop. So what they did is that they were like, and this crop, of course, it is a plant. So they thought they took that crop, they checked it, and then this crop had a bacteria from the soil, which is called Bacillus. The other name in English is really tough. So, but Bacillus thuringiensis. I'm not even going to try to say it. So that's where the BT came from. So this plant was so what we see, the soil has that particular, it has the BT bacteria. So this, when what they do now, they decide this bacteria, when it is eaten by caterpillars, the caterpillars die. So they took that plant, they were able to extract the BT. So that is not the desired trait, and that the desired trait was whatever that was toxic to the caterpillars. And then now after they've removed it, then they were able to extract the desired DNA out of the bacteria. And then they put that bacteria in the plant. So what we call is the gene insertion into the corn. And then after they have put the gene into the corn, it now as it grows, that gene was spread around the plant. So therefore, when the caterpillars would come and try to eat into the stalk of the corn, they would die. Now, that is one of the things. So you can see that it is another plant that was killing these items, and the desirable trait is this particular plant is the plants are the pests are avoiding them. So the desired trait is what is making them not eaten by the caterpillars. So that is the desired trait. Now, when it comes now to even in other species, like now, for instance, when we look at the rice, the golden rice we've heard about, is that again we see that a particular plant, like now, for instance, carrot has a lot of vitamin A, and so what was felt is that in places where they eat a lot of rice, because rice is very low on vitamin A, and it is as a staple, then the kids used to suffer from malnutrition. So what they did is that they inserted the gene that creates vitamin A into the rice, so that the rice grows and provides, now the rice that is eaten thereafter has vitamin A. So that is about now the GMO. We find a desirable trait in a plant. We extract that trait. We put its DNA. We can even use a DNA gun. We put its DNA and ensure that it is absorbed by another plant, and then now breed the plant now further, and so that all its production, like everything else that it produces in future, has the trait that we have put in it. So that is actually the nuance, of rather the gist of GMOs. We are genetically.
Considering you're a mathematician, it's so weird to hear you explain all this.
I love
Biology
reading.
concepts. Yeah.
I love reading.
In a simple
the,
term, in a simple
Mhm.
way. That's the most, I think, something that stands out. You love reading, you're saying?
Yes, I love reading. Like, I read medical books, I read physics books, I read everything. I love reading. I think that's what makes me a scientist. Yeah, when you're open to new information from other fields. And mathematics, really, we say that maths is the king, but if you look at it from a chess perspective, maths is the queen, and then all the other sciences are there to serve us. The pawns.
What does it mean to you for the GMO ban to be lifted in Kenya?
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm very, very excited because from where let's start before we even start the whole conversation of GMO. The first question would be, why how did it come about? Because we have to understand its genesis and so forth. When we look at the 1840s, like now I'm looking at it from the Irish history. The 1840s were a bleak time in Irish history. Like now, you can imagine 1 in every 6 people dying of starvation or disease. And that particular period, we had a blight. And this blight, I'm not going to even say the scientific name. I'll just call it the late blight. Yeah, late blight. It is BLIGHT. And it is a fungus. This blight came about in the 1840s. It is a fungus, and it attacked the potato plantations, and all the potatoes became inedible. So what used to do, what the fungus did is that it would spread, the spores would spread easily in the wind and quickly infect neighboring plants. So the thing is that what makes it such a remarkable time is that it became so disastrous because potatoes were the only items rather hugely relied upon by the Irish people for food, especially the rural poor. So what happened is that it was so bad, people starved and very many people died. When you look at the statistics, is that you imagine within a decade, you find that around 30 or 40 or 50% of a particular village has been wiped out. Yeah. So what happens is that now the blight continued being a problem in Ireland, but in the 1850s they tried to address it, but it did not disappear. More than 160 years later, Ireland still let me say, they still feel the brunt of that particular blight, and it's still there in today's island. But the good thing is that what they do is that the farmers spray a lot. They spray a lot of what do you call it? Yeah, fungicides every week, indefinitely, to ensure that they deal with it. But the question is, do we really want to be in a position where our food is continuously sprayed with either bactericides or pesticides or fungicides or such? Yeah. So now what happened now in 2015, we call it a breakthrough. In 2015, a breakthrough came over as a new variety of GMO potato. And this particular potato was able to resist the blight. Yeah. And now from it then, we could see that it was able to resist the blight. And because of the resistance gene, they started studying it, like what is so good with this kind of potato? How is it able to resist this particular fungi, which is really bad? So therefore the scientists started looking at it and studying its genes, and therefore they were able to extract the desirable trait that made it unattractive to the fungi. And now the rest of it is history, because now from then on, therefore it brought a huge debate about especially I'm speaking about Ireland because Ireland right now has banned all GMOs. And the reason why I'm using it as an example is that given that it's a country that suffered so much from something that can be addressed by accepting or allowing GMO products, at this, and so if it is something that can be addressed by introducing or lifting a ban on the GMO products, one. Second, by protecting also its citizens from having to use weekly fungicides on their potatoes indefinitely for forever. You find that kind of a discussion is actually it's not just time for Kenya. I think it's time for other countries that have banned GMO to have that discussion. Now, so when we look at, and now I just used Ireland as an example, and this is when we look at first, the major thing is that most organisms, human beings, animals, plants, one of the biggest challenge we face is survival. Actually, that is our core mandate, to survive. And anything that threatens our survival, we address it.
Yeah.
That's why we study history. That's why we study languages, so that we can be able to understand how the people before us were communicating and how they were able to talk about danger and procreation. That's why we study art and music, and everything that we study, everything that we learn today is pegged on our survival. So for GMO to come across is that people felt threatened, and it came across through lack of food, and this food was the people were lacking food either because of harsh climatic condition. Look at what is happening in Meru today. The Miraa farms are dry. So we find harsh climatic conditions. We find insects. Remember that time we had these insects where the agricultural CS was telling us we should hunt them. What was that? And at that time, it's, these doodles, they came and they terrorized most of African countries. So it is either the insects or the climate or even the microbes. So it could be anything. So first, our fundamental role, what we look for as human beings is survival. We want to perpetuate our lives. We want to increase our life expectancy and so forth. So, but increasingly, one way to survive is to eat. And we find that most of us find our food from the ground, from plants. Even the animals that we eat have to get food from the ground. And so when the plants are threatened, their survival is threatened, then the animals' lives are threatened, the human beings' lives are threatened. So therefore, scientists had to find ways to address this particular space, or to address this particular thing. Like, how do we ensure that insects do not make us go through droughts and famines? How do we ensure that the climate, no matter how hard it is, that we can actually have a yield at the end of this particular season? So when we talk about, when I heard that the government of Kenya is lifting the GMO ban, I was very excited. And what excites me is to shed some light, why I would be excited is actually maybe perhaps by taking you through the benefits of GMO. And the first one is actually looking at the quality of seed. And yes, there has been debate that the seeds they are not what they say. They are monopolized, or we access them through limited number of companies worldwide. So there is a fear that we will not be able to access them. But as some of my fellow scientists would have pointed out, and some of Kenyans have pointed out, is that how many things do we produce as Kenya? Most of the things we actually buy. So what will be so novel about buying seeds from another company or country which is outside Kenya? And when you look at the quality of the seeds, these particular seeds that GMO produces, they are usually tolerant to drought. So whatever is happening in most of the parts of the country, in particular Meru, it's not something we would be experiencing if we had better quality seeds. And then some of them, the seeds are also they are tolerant from pests. Like now the GM potatoes I mentioned when I was talking about the Irish case, the one that were they were discovered in 2015. And then the second bit is the insect-resistant crops. Yeah. And that is for me, that one is very key, because when you're talking about insect-resistant crops, is what is the impact of it,
Yeah.
And one is that the crops don't get destroyed by the caterpillars or the other insects. And then two, we use less insecticides. Yeah. Insecticides, or even pesticides, for example. Yeah. And even studies have been done that have shown indisputable decrease in insecticides used when BT or similar crops are planted. We use less. So I can arguably say that we actually eat fresher food.
Yeah.
And then the third one is that there is also under GMO, we've seen this technology where you can spray a whole land, but now some of the crops targeting the weeds only, and the crops themselves are not destroyed. That is, again, what we do is that the plants are whatever the spray they use on the plants is able to target only the weed, because the plants have been they've been modified, they've been made stronger, and therefore you are more efficient. And someone asked, there are some concerns that have been raised. One is that if these plants that when the caterpillars are eating, they die, if they're killing the caterpillars, then what will they do to us as human beings? But the thing is, how many things do animals eat and we don't, or do we eat and other people or other animals don't eat? For example,
yes,
when you give a dog chocolate, it dies.
For real?
For real. Yet we enjoy chocolate.
Yeah.
Does that mean because it kills a dog, it's bad for us? No. Yeah. And also, when you look at apart from that, we have even seen some coffee kills some insects, and yet we consume it. So the fact that it kills the caterpillars does not mean it is bad for us. Yeah. Yeah. And then now, the other aspect I would look at it from also is the benefit is about malnutrition, addressing of malnutrition. And so we look at one of them is, I would talk about the old case of vitamin A deficiency. And that's when we are talking about the golden rice. And this particular rice produces beta carotene, which is a precursor of vitamin A found in carrots. And what we have seen is that a bowl, just 1 cup of golden rice per day per person can prevent vitamin A deficiency in a population.
Wow.
I know. And then when we even look at now climate change, for example, we also see that gene-edited crops have the potential to cut climate emissions in agriculture and reduce harmful chemicals in the environment if they are regulated properly. So again, when you look at, I can't stop attacking Ireland. When you look at Ireland trying to push or to prohibit cultivation of GMOs, is at odds with its ambitions for climate action. Because when you think about the fact that they have less climate emissions, it's able to cut climate emissions in agriculture, reduce harmful chemicals, it's reducing use of pesticides, and so what is this we are talking about? And yes, and some of we have, of course, had a lot of issues that have been raised about GMOs. And so for me, I'm looking at it also from an excitement part of it, because as a scientist, I believe that challenges create more opportunities. Yeah? So one of the things is that we have heard is that, of course, there are environmental concerns. Like now, when we look at the BT crops, for example, the BT is the complicated name that I was unable to mention before. But someone can Google them and they will find the full name. What happens is that studies have shown that there's this particular what we call glyphosate. Yeah, it's glyphosate. Yeah, glyphosate-based herbicides called Roundup, and it was being produced by Monsanto, and which now has been bought by Bayer. And what we see is that what it has led to more to farmers rather. Yeah, it has made to farmers to use 28% more herbicide. Because you remember the spray I was telling you that targets the weeds only and leaves the crops. Yeah. So since they came up with Roundup, we have seen more and more farmers are using more and more herbicides than non-adopters. So what happens is that we are seeing that the use of the glyphosate use has risen almost 15 folds since Roundup came about. And this is not really good for environment and even the people, because it leaks into the soil and the surrounding water is affected, and wild plants, of course, which are finally eaten by animals. And therefore it can hurt the food chain. So the question, that this kind of a challenge is that, okay, we have something that gets rid of the weed, but it is harmful to the soil and it is being overused. So what are the opportunities therein? What can we do? Yeah. And the second concern people raised, or rather have been raised or the world over, is about the carcinogenic properties of GMOs. Like there is the whole, like even the World Health Organization declared that Roundup, the one that we bought up there, the glyphosate-based herbicide, has carcinogenic properties. And but they have not. It is not published in a scientific paper. They just declared it as thus, and if there is very little facts to support that. But now, what makes it interesting is that other research people have pointed out that the herbicide would have an effect on the mitochondria and brain functions in animal. Because they are eating this particular, once they seep into the ground, they are eaten by the animals, so it affects the brain of the animals. But now the bad thing or the good thing is that the research is still being carried out, so there is no, these are a simple hypothesis. Yeah. And as scientists, we ask ourselves then, what are the opportunities there, and how can we address this? Do we need to do more research? Do we need, so it creates other areas of growth and other potential areas of study, if you ask me. And then and the other thing is that the Monsanto is embroiled in lawsuits, and unfortunately a jury in California recently awarded a couple $2 billion. And in as much as what now for me to address it is that, yes, the award of the money and the verdict of the jury should not be taken as a scientific verdict or a scientific evidence, because according to the court's paperwork, it was like the verdict was based on the Monsanto, the company, which are manipulating its own research, and they colluded with regulators, and then they intimidated scientists to keep secret any risks that were associated with the glyphosate. It's not that the research showed it is carcinogenic. It is now the unethical behavior around which the company acted, and that's why they were fined. So again, people who are making noise or they are against GMO, like, oh, it causes cancer. Where is the evidence? Oh, some guys were paid. Okay, but what was the basis of that payment based on the court paper? The court was not convinced that the scientists themselves were not even convinced that the particular herbicides were causing cancer. But the fact that the conversation had started, then it created a lot of controversy around GMOs, and those are the controversies now we need to be a bit careful when we are dealing with it.
Now I'm assuming that you are pro GMO, right?
I am pro GMO.
Yeah.
Oh, completely.
So what message do you have to an anti-GMO?
What I can say is that I think if I was to say, maybe as a conclusion, to say GMOs are harmful is like saying the internet is harmful. Yes, it can be used in harmful ways, yeah? That is the internet. But we all know that it has the potential to do wonderful things for millions of people. It has given us jobs and so forth. It has made us connect with each other and also made the poor people access information which previously they wouldn't. Yeah. So the same way we would treat something like internet with all its benefit and of course potential, not potential, even we've seen cyberbullying, we've seen content, very negative content being spread at lightning speed and so forth. So it is the same thing we would look at GMOs like, yeah. So to oppose GMOs, I think, is unequivocally without giving them a chance, without looking at what good they can do, is simplistic and misguided. And what I look at, how I look at the world and even human beings, is that everything and everyone is like a moon, you know. The size and the type of the moon is what differs. It could be a crescent, it could be a half moon, it could be gibbous, it could be a full moon. When it has a bright side, the other side is in darkness. Yeah. So it is up to us to try to see how we can reduce the darkness, because nothing is perfect.
Have you eaten GMO?
I don't even know what it had been banned, so I'm suspecting I haven't. But if I was served a plate of food and I was told it is GMO, I would eat it. And the good thing is that around labeling, it was also another concern. Kenyans were like, "Oh, suppose I don't want to eat GMO, will I be forced?" No. And when we are looking at the National Biosafety Authority, they have been working on different paperworks, and this conversion started some time ago in Kenya. Until now, it was banned in 2012. And when you look at around the now National Biosafety Authority, the regulations around handling the GMOs products, one of them is very key, is labeling, that all GMO products should be clearly labeled. So yes, I will definitely go into a supermarket and buy GMO products and eat them. Because let me ask you, you don't think that the things we eat today they are not like they are 100% okay? Even the water we drink is treated at the Nairobi Water Company. We do not know what they put in. We are just told it's chlorine and so forth. The air itself, we breathe in so many toxins. What is so wrong with eating a particular product that is made to simply be drought resistant? Maybe also as a take home for us as a country is that one of the things we are looking at is actually extending our life expectancy. And what better way to learn if not by looking at your neighbor, what they're doing? You know, they say that the bright ones, they learn from their mistakes, but the wise ones learn from others' mistakes. And I wouldn't look at it now from a mistake perspective. We can also learn from other people's successes. And looking at Japan, for example, Japan has the highest life expectancy in the world, and they have allowed GMO in their country. So if it was that bad, don't you think we should be seeing Japanese dropping down, dying with cancer and all sorts of diseases that are being used as a propaganda tool against GMOs?
How long have they used it? Someone might be asking.
That's a good question. What I know is that they use Japan has not banned GMO, but let me actually find that information for you. That one I don't have an answer.
So they started importing GM crops in 1996. I'm just Googled.
Oh,
sorry.
Imagine. So 96.
So there's someone who's been eating GMO
since they were born in 96, and they are currently 26 years old.
Yeah. What do you think? Let me know what you think on any social media platform at TV Scientist Pod. And tune into the following episodes to hear voices from other typical Kenyans, farmers, and GMO regulators that I promised you about. To support or learn more, go to thevulnerablescientist.com. Until next time, bye-bye.